Thrown out at 17, she inherited her grandpa's forgotten tool barn. What she discovered hidden in the walls would redefine the meaning of family, fortune, and home forever. If you've ever felt lost and wondered if there was a plan for you that you just couldn't see yet, hit that subscribe button because this story is for you. The front door clicked shut behind me with a sound so final it felt like a gunshot in the quiet suburban street. It was a cold, sharp sound that severed the last thread connecting me to the life I'd known. My mother's face, a mask of tight, angry lines, was the last thing I saw through the glass. My stepfather, Richard, stood behind her, a shadow with his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and impatience. The fight had been stupid, one of 1,000 stupid fights, but this one had been the last one. It was about grades, about my attitude, about the fact that I wasn't his daughter and he was tired of paying for a ghost at his dinner table. I was 17, 3 months shy of my 18th birthday, and legally, they could still call this discipline. In reality, it was an eviction. My belongings were in a single black trash bag clutched in my right hand. 2 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, a worn copy of a book my grandpa had given me, and my phone. The charger was still plugged in by my bed. A small, hysterical laugh bubbled in my throat. Of all the things to forget. The November air was brutal, slicing through my thin hoodie. It smelled of wet leaves and distant wood smoke, the smell of other people's cozy, intact homes. I stood on the manicured lawn, the grass stiff with frost, and watched the warm yellow light of the living room window. I was outside of it now, completely and irrevocably outside. I walked. There was nothing else to do. I walked until the neat rows of houses with their identical mailboxes bled into the commercial strip, a blur of neon signs for pizza joints and laundromats. Each step was a tiny, percussive beat against the pavement, counting down to… what? I had no idea. My grandparents were gone. My dad had been out of the picture since I was a baby. My friends' parents might take me in for a night, maybe 2, but they all had their own lives, their own problems. I was a problem. Richard had made that very clear. A constant, draining problem were his exact words. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a wild, stupid moment, my heart leaped. Maybe it was Mom, telling me to come back, that it was all a mistake. But the screen showed an unknown number with an area code I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but what else was there to do? I answered, my voice a raw whisper. Hello? Am I speaking with Maya Anderson? A man's voice asked. It was deep and gravelly, like stones rolling around in a barrel. It sounded old. Yes, I said, my teeth chattering. Who is this? My name is Arthur Gable. I was your grandfather's attorney. And his friend. My grandfather. He'd been gone for 2 years. His death had been the first real crack in the foundation of my world. After he passed, my mom had sold his small house so fast my head spun. She said it was too painful to keep. I thought she just wanted the money. Okay, I said slowly, pulling the hoodie tighter around myself. What's this about? I've been trying to reach your mother for a few weeks now, but she hasn't returned my calls. It concerns the final disposition of your grandfather's estate. Estate? That was a laugh. Grandpa Joe was a carpenter, a handyman. He had a beat-up truck, a collection of worn flannel shirts, and hands as rough as bark. He didn't have an estate. There's nothing left, I said, the words tasting bitter. My mother sold the house. She sold the residential property, yes, Mr. Gable corrected gently. But there was a second parcel, a small commercial plot on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a workshop, a barn, really. He was very specific in his will. That property and everything in it was to be left to you, and only you, to be transferred on your 18th birthday. I stopped walking. The garish light of a 24-hour convenience store spilled onto the sidewalk around me. A barn? That's right. It's in a place called Cold Creek, About 4 hours north of you." He paused. "Look, Maya, I know this is coming out of the blue. Your grandfather stipulated I wasn't to contact you until we were within 90 days of your 18th birthday. He had his reasons. Are you somewhere you can talk?" I looked at my reflection in the convenience store window, a pale, skinny girl with wide, scared eyes clutching a garbage bag. "Not really," I said, my voice cracking. I'm not at home right now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of papers rustling. Mr. Gable didn't ask why I wasn't home. He didn't press. He just absorbed the information. "I see," he said, his voice softer now. "Well, the situation is this. The property taxes on the barn are 2 years delinquent. The county is set to seize it and auction it off in 30 days. The total due is $2,416. $2,000. It might as well have been $2 million. I had $36 in my pocket. "I don't have that kind of money," I said flatly. It wasn't an admission of defeat. It was just a fact, like the color of the sky. "I understand," he said. "There's also another interested party. A development firm, Westward Holdings. They've been buying up land in Cold Creek. They've made an offer, $10,000 for the plot. It's a lowball offer, frankly, but it's cash. It would cover the back taxes and leave you with a little over $7,000. $7,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering. It was a life raft. It was a bus ticket to somewhere warm. A security deposit on a tiny apartment. Enough money to eat for months. It was a way out. "They need an answer by the end of the week," Mr. Gable continued. "If you sell, I can wire the money to you once the paperwork clears." I thought of Grandpa Joe, the smell of sawdust that clung to his clothes, the way he'd let me sit in his workshop for hours, watching him turn rough pieces of wood into something beautiful and smooth. He never got angry when I asked a million questions. He'd just smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Why would he leave me a barn he knew I couldn't afford to keep? It didn't make any sense. "What's in it?" I asked. "The barn. Tools, I imagine, lumber, old equipment. I haven't been inside it in years." Joe was a private man. He paused again. "He loved you very much, Maya. He talked about you all the time. He said you were the only one who understood the value of working with your hands." My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed to hear that until I heard it. I looked down at my own hands, pale and trembling in the cold. I didn't know what to do. I was homeless, broke, and 17. Selling was the only logical choice, the smart choice. But a tiny, stubborn part of me, the part that was all my grandfather, whispered, "No, not yet." "Can I see it?" I asked. "Before I decide?" There was another pause. I pictured him in a dusty office, surrounded by stacks of books, a single lamp cutting through the gloom. A man from another time. "It's a long bus ride," he said, not as a warning, but as a statement of fact. "And there's nowhere to stay in Cold Creek, not really. The motel closed down years ago." "I don't care," I said. The words came out stronger than I felt. "I need to see it." "All right," Mr. Gable said. His voice held a note of something I couldn't quite decipher. Respect, maybe. "I'll leave the key under a loose stone by the front door. It's a big red barn just off Route 4. You can't miss it. Call me when you get there. And Maya?" "Yeah?" "Be careful." The bus ride was a 4-hour journey through a landscape that grew progressively emptier. The sprawling suburbs gave way to farmland, then to dense, dark forests of pine. The other passengers were a quiet, weary collection of souls, each lost in their own world. I watched the towns roll by, their names painted on faded wooden signs: Harmony, Pine Ridge, Summit. They were places people left, not places they went to. I huddled by the window, the trash bag of my life at my feet, and tried not to think. Thinking was dangerous. It led to the memory of the slamming door, to the cold knot of panic in my stomach, to the overwhelming certainty that I had nowhere to go. So I just watched the trees. They were tall and silent, their branches skeletal against the pale gray sky. They had been here for 100 years, and they would be here for 100 more, There was a kind of comfort in that. Cold Creek wasn't so much a town as a suggestion of one. There was a gas station with a convenience store attached, a post office, a volunteer fire department, and a handful of houses with peeling paint and sagging porches. The bus let me off in front of the gas station. The driver gave me a long, pitying look as I stepped out into the biting wind. "You sure this is your stop, kid?" he asked. I just nodded, pulling my hood up. The air was different here, sharper, cleaner, with the scent of pine and damp earth. It was the smell of my grandfather's workshop. Mr. Gable was right. You couldn't miss the barn. It was a quarter-mile walk down Route 4, standing alone in a wide, overgrown field. It was huge, far bigger than I'd imagined. Its red paint faded to a soft, dusty rose by decades of sun and snow. The roof was metal and streaked with rust, and one of the big sliding doors hung slightly askew, like a broken jaw. It looked abandoned, forgotten, a monument to a dead man's hobby. For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was a mistake. I should have just told Mr. Gable to sell it. I should be on a bus heading south, not standing in the middle of nowhere, staring at a dilapidated building that was about to be seized by the government. But I had promised myself I would see it. I owed my grandfather that much. The field was a mess of tangled, thorny weeds and tall, dead grass that crunched under my sneakers. The barn loomed larger with every step, its shadow falling over me. It wasn't just a building. It had a presence. It felt ancient and watchful. As I got closer, I saw the details: the solid stone foundation, the thick, hand-hewn timbers, the way the windows, cloudy with grime, were set high up under the eaves like sleepy eyes. This place was built to last. It was built by someone who cared. I found the loose stone by the big, man-sized door set into the larger sliding one. It was a flat piece of slate, and underneath it, nestled in the cold dirt, was a heavy, old-fashioned iron key. It felt solid and real in my hand. It was the key to my inheritance. The lock was stiff and rusted. I had to put my whole body into it, grunting with effort, until it finally gave way with a loud, grating groan. The door swung inward into darkness. A wave of cold, still air washed over me, carrying the scent I remembered so vividly: sawdust, oil, and thyme. I stepped inside, and for a moment I couldn't see anything. The only light came from the open doorway behind me and the grimy windows high above. As my eyes adjusted, the cavernous space began to take shape. It was a cathedral of wood and work. Light filtered down in dusty shafts, illuminating floating motes of sawdust like tiny, dancing spirits. A massive workbench ran the entire length of one wall, its surface scarred with the ghosts of 1,000 projects. Tools hung from pegs on the walls in neat, orderly rows, saws of every size, hammers, chisels, planes. They were coated in a fine layer of dust, but otherwise looked cared for, waiting patiently to be picked up again. Stacks of lumber were piled in the corners, organized by type and size. In the center of the floor sat a huge table saw, shrouded in a canvas tarp like a sleeping beast. Everything was exactly where it should be. It was as if my grandfather had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any minute. I ran my hand along the workbench, my fingers tracing a deep gouge in the wood. I remembered him standing right here, showing me how to hold a hammer, his big, rough hand covering mine. "You gotta respect the wood, Maya," he'd say, "and you gotta respect the tools." He wasn't just a handyman, he was a craftsman, and this was his sanctuary. It was cold, colder than it was outside, but it wasn't an empty cold. It was the deep, patient cold of a place that holds memories. I walked deeper into the barn, my footsteps echoing in the vast silence. I saw the old wood stove in the corner, a metal coffee pot still sitting on top of it. I saw the worn armchair where he used to sit and sketch out his plans on a notepad. I saw a child's drawing of a lopsided bird taped to the wall. My own work from when I was 6. He had saved it all this time. The weight of the last 24 hours, of the last 2 years, suddenly crashed down on me. The fight, the door slamming, the lonely bus ride, the crushing reality of my situation. I slid down the wall, pulling my knees to my chest, and I finally let myself cry. I cried for my grandfather, for the easy comfort of his presence that I'd never have again. I cried for the mother I had lost long before she'd closed the door on me. And I cried for myself, for the scared, lost 17-year-old girl sitting in a dusty barn with $36 to her name. Have you ever been in a place that felt more like home than your actual home? A place that just seemed to understand you, to hold you. For me, that was this barn. If this is hitting you, if you know what that feels like, let me know in the comments. We're a community of people who get it. Your story matters here. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollowed out, but also strangely calm. The panic was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. I had to decide what to do. Selling was still the sensible option. $10,000 was a fortune. But as I looked around the barn, at the tools my grandfather had held, at the evidence of a life spent creating, selling felt like a betrayal. It felt like tearing down a church. Mr. Gable had said my grandfather was specific, the barn and everything in it. Why? Why not just leave me money? It had to mean something. I got up and started to explore more methodically. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to see the place through his eyes. I ran my hands over the tools, feeling their weight, their perfect balance. I opened drawers in the workbench. They were filled with screws and nails, sorted into little glass jars. Pencils, sharpened to a perfect point. Folded blueprints for projects I didn't recognize. A cradle, a bookshelf, a complex-looking gazebo. He was always building, always making. In the back corner, behind a stack of cedar planks, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. It was a section of the wall where the wooden planks were a different color, a slightly lighter shade of pine. They looked newer than the surrounding wood. I ran my hand over them. They were smooth, almost seamless. But at the very bottom, near the floor, I felt a tiny notch, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. My heart started to beat a little faster. I knelt down, my fingers probing the notch. It was just big enough to get a fingernail into. I pulled. The plank didn't budge. I looked around and grabbed a small, flathead screwdriver from the workbench. It felt right in my hand, like an extension of my own fingers. I wedged the tip into the seam and gently pried. With a soft groan of old wood, a section of the wall, about 3 feet wide and 4 feet high, swung inward on hidden hinges. It wasn't a panel, it was a door. Behind it was a dark, hollow space. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and landed on a small metal strongbox sitting on a dusty shelf built into the framing of the wall. It was the kind of box you'd use for cash or important papers, with a simple lock on the front. And sitting right on top of it was a thick, cream-colored envelope with my name, Maya, written on it in my grandfather's familiar, blocky script. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was the reason. I reached in, my fingers brushing away cobwebs, and lifted the envelope. It was heavy. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, the beam of my phone's flashlight trembling in my hand, and I carefully broke the seal. Inside were several folded sheets of paper covered in his handwriting, and a small brass key, the kind for a lockbox. I unfolded the first page and began to read. My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and things have probably gotten as bad as I feared they might. I hope I'm wrong. I hope your mother came to her senses and you're reading this on your 18th birthday, in a warm house, safe and sound. But I was never one for wishful thinking. I believe in preparing for the storm. And Maya, I always knew a storm was coming for you. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper steady. He knew. Somehow he had known this would happen. I'm going to tell you a few things now, and they might be hard to hear, but you're strong. You've got more steel in you than anyone I know. You get that from your grandmother. First, your mother. I love her, she's my daughter, but after your grandma passed, something broke in her. She started seeing the world in dollars and cents. She sees this land, this barn, as a burden, an asset to be liquidated. She doesn't see the heart in it. That's why I couldn't leave it to her. She would have sold it before the dirt on my grave was settled. I had to protect it. For you. I had to stop and take a deep, shuddering breath. He was right. That's exactly what she did with the house. She had the for sale sign up within a week. Second, this barn, this land. It's been in our family for 100 years. My grandfather built it with his own 2 hands. It's more than just a building, Maya. It's a legacy. It's a place where things are made, not just bought and sold. It's a place to be independent, to stand on your own 2 feet. That's the most important thing I can ever give you. I looked around the silent, dusty space. A legacy. He wasn't leaving me a thing. He was leaving me a place. A foundation. Now, for the practical matters. The key in this envelope is for the strong box. Inside you will find 2 things. The first is cash, $25,000. It's every spare penny I saved over the last 10 years of my life. I sold my truck. I lived cheap. I put it all aside for you. Use it to pay the back taxes immediately. That is the first and most important step. Arthur Gable is a good man. He will help you. The rest is for you to live on while you figure things out. It's a runway, not a treasure chest. $25,000. The number was so large it felt unreal. It was more money than I had ever imagined holding in my hands. It was safety. It was a future. I looked at the strong box, then back at the letter. There was more. The second thing in the box is another envelope. It contains documents. They will explain why this particular piece of land is so important and why people might try to take it from you. Don't be afraid. Just be smart. There is a development company, Westward Holdings, that has been sniffing around here for years. They know what's under this land, and they will try to get it for cheap. They will offer you what sounds like a lot of money. They will pressure you. They will tell you that you're just a kid and you don't know what you're doing. Don't you believe them? His words felt like a direct warning, a voice reaching out from the past to guide me. He had anticipated every move. He had laid out a path for me in the dark. This is your choice, Maya. It's a heavy one, and I'm sorry for that. You can take the money from the box, sell this place to the developers, and walk away. No one would blame you. You can start a new life somewhere else, free and clear. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can make this place your own. The money is enough to pay the taxes and give you a start. It won't be easy. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. But this place is yours, if you want it. Your real inheritance isn't the money, kiddo. It's the choice. The letter ended there. All my love, Grandpa Joe. I sat in the darkness for a long time, the letter clutched in my hand. The cold from the concrete floor seeped into my bones, but I barely felt it. My mind was reeling. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been planning for this, preparing a lifeboat for me all along. He had trusted me. He had believed in me when no one else did, not even myself. The anger I had felt toward my mother, the despair of being alone, it all began to recede, replaced by a fierce, burning wave of love for this man who had seen me so clearly. I used the key. The lock on the strongbox opened with a satisfying click. Inside, just as he'd said, were stacks of $100 bills, neatly bundled, and a thick manila envelope sealed with wax. I lifted the money out. It was heavy, dense with possibility. I counted one stack, $10,000. There were 2.5 stacks. It was real. I set the cash aside and picked up the second envelope. It felt important, dangerous even. I broke the seal. Inside was a sheaf of documents, a geological survey report, copies of correspondence between my grandfather and a law firm I didn't recognize, and a hand-drawn map of the property. I wasn't an expert, but I could understand the basics. The geological survey, dated 3 years ago, showed a significant deposit of high-purity quartz deep beneath the property, the kind used in manufacturing semiconductors and electronics. The correspondence was my grandfather repeatedly turning down offers from Westward Holdings, offers that started at $50,000 and went up to $250,000. They hadn't offered me $10,000 because the land was worthless. They'd offered me $10,000 because they thought I was a stupid, desperate kid who wouldn't know any better. And they had been right. Almost. A cold fury washed over me. They were trying to cheat me. They were trying to steal my family's legacy for pennies on the dollar. They were counting on me being broken. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Arthur Gable. I answered, my voice steady now, filled with a resolve I hadn't possessed an hour ago. "Maya, are you all right? It's getting dark out there." "I'm fine, Mr. Gable," I said. "I've made a decision." "You have?" "Yes. I'm not selling." There was a profound silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him smiling. "I see," he said, his voice laced with satisfaction. "And the matter of the delinquent taxes?" "I can pay them," I said. "I'll be at your office in the morning with the cash." "I'll be waiting," he said. "And Maya, your grandfather would be very proud." When I hung up, the barn felt different. It was no longer a cold, abandoned shell. It was a fortress. It was my fortress. The first night was hard. I found a pile of old, clean canvas tarps and made a makeshift bed in the corner, near the armchair. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the contents of a trash bag, but I also had a purpose. I ate a stale granola bar I found at the bottom of my bag and huddled under the tarps, my grandfather's letter clutched in my hand. The wind howled outside, rattling the big doors, but for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I wasn't just a runaway anymore, I was a property owner. I had a fight on my hands. The next morning, I walked the 2 miles into the main part of town to find Arthur Gable's office. It was on the second floor of the only brick building on Main Street, above a hardware store. The stairs creaked with every step. The office was exactly as I'd pictured it, cluttered with books and files, smelling of old paper and coffee. Mr. Gable was a tall, stooped man with kind eyes and a fringe of white hair. He looked me up and down, taking in my thin hoodie and tired face, but he didn't say a word about my appearance. He just gestured to the chair in front of his desk. I pulled the bundled cash out of my backpack. I'd bought one at the gas station store and placed it on his desk. $2,416. He counted it slowly and deliberately, then wrote me a receipt. "I'll get this over to the county courthouse today," he said, looking at me over the top of his glasses. "As of this afternoon, the property will be in good standing, and in your name." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, Westward Holdings gets a phone call from me, informing them that their offer has been declined." He leaned back in his chair. "They won't be happy. They'll likely come back with a higher offer, much higher. Are you prepared for that?" "They think the land is valuable because of a quartz deposit," I said, watching his face. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Your grandfather was a sharp man," he said. "He did his homework." "He said they would pressure me." "They will. They'll try to bury you in legal paperwork. They'll challenge the zoning. They'll make your life difficult. They're a big company with deep pockets. You're a 17-year-old girl living in a barn." "The barn has a wood stove," I said quietly, "and I'm a fast learner." He studied me for a long moment, a genuine, slow smile spreading across his face. "Yes," he said, "I believe you are." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Arthur Gable was true to his word. He became my guide and my shield. He filed the paperwork to have me legally emancipated, a process made easier by the fact that my mother, when contacted, officially signed away her parental rights without a second thought. That stung, but it also set me free. The developers came back with a new offer, as predicted, $50,000. I told Arthur to refuse. They came back with $100,000. I refused again. Their tone, relayed through their lawyers, began to shift from friendly to threatening. They mentioned things like eminent domain and public use. Arthur told me not to worry. "They're just trying to scare you," he said. "They have no legal grounds. Not yet. We just need to hold our ground." While the legal battle simmered, I focused on the barn. It was my entire world. I spent the money my grandfather left me with careful precision. I bought a used sleeping bag and a thick air mattress. I bought groceries, I bought work gloves and cleaning supplies, and I started to clean. For 2 weeks, I did nothing but sweep, scrub, and organize. I dusted every tool, wiped down every surface. I washed the grimy windows, and for the first time in years, clear, bright sunlight streamed into the barn, transforming it. It wasn't just a dusty workshop anymore. It was becoming a home. As I worked, I felt a connection to my grandfather that was deeper than memory. My hands were doing the same work his had done. I was touching the things he had touched. I was breathing the same air. I found more of his legacy hidden in plain sight. Tucked into a ledger on his desk were notes on sustainable farming, on crop rotation, on how to live off the grid. He hadn't just been a carpenter, he'd been a dreamer. He had a vision for this land that went far beyond a simple workshop. He wanted it to be self-sufficient, a sanctuary. The town of Cold Creek began to notice me. At first, they were suspicious. A teenage girl living alone in the old Anderson barn? It was strange. But people in small towns are also practical. The man at the hardware store, a burly guy named Frank, started giving me discounts on supplies after I spent an hour helping him unload a shipment of lumber without being asked. The librarian, a woman named Mrs. Gable, Arthur's wife, I learned, brought me a box of old paperbacks and a thermos of hot soup one afternoon. They didn't ask a lot of questions, they just watched. They were waiting to see if I would stick. It's a funny thing, making a home. It's not about having furniture or decorations. It's about the slow, steady accumulation of your own presence. It's the way you learn the creak of a specific floorboard, the way the light falls at a certain time of day. It's the work you put into it. The barn was a cold, empty shell when I arrived. But with every nail I hammered and every board I cleaned, it was becoming mine. I think a lot of us are looking for a place to put down roots, a place to belong. Sometimes you have to build that place yourself, from the ground up. If you've ever had to start over, to build a new life from the wreckage of an old one, I want you to know you're not alone. This channel, this community, it's for people who know how to rebuild. Thanks for being here. Let's get back to the story. The first real winter snow came in mid-December. It fell thick and fast, blanketing the field and muffling the whole world in a deep, profound silence. I had managed to get the old wood stove working. I'd spent a week cleaning the flue and another day splitting a pile of firewood I found stacked against the back wall. The warmth from the stove pushed back the biting cold, creating a small island of comfort in the vastness of the barn. It was on one of those snowy evenings, with the fire crackling and the wind whistling outside, that I found the last piece of my grandfather's puzzle. I was organizing his old blueprints, trying to make sense of his projects, when I found a set of drawings that were different from the others. They weren't for a piece of furniture. They were architectural plans. They were plans for a house. A small, simple, beautiful house. And the plans were designed to be built right onto the existing foundation of the barn, incorporating the main structure as a great room and workshop. There were notes in the margins in his familiar handwriting. Use the reclaimed pine from the old mill. Solar panels on the south-facing roof. A greenhouse here for winter vegetables. It was his dream. He had been planning to build a home here. A home for us. Tucked inside the rolled-up blueprints was one final letter. This one was shorter. Maya, if you've found these, it means you chose to stay. I knew you would. You have a builder's heart. This was my plan, to build a place for you, for me, for us. A place where no one could ever throw you out. I ran out of time, kiddo, but the plan is all there. The materials are here. The tools are here. Everything you need. You don't have to build it, but I wanted you to know that this was the dream. Not to sell the land, but to grow on it. Not to dig down for what's underneath, but to build up toward the sky. Whatever you do, make it a good story. Love, Grandpa. I sat there, the plans spread out on the workbench, and I saw it. I saw the house he had dreamed of. I saw the life he had wanted for me. He hadn't just left me a choice, he had left me a blueprint. The next week, I got a call from Arthur. Westward Holdings had made their final offer, $500,000 cash, and they had filed a preliminary motion to have the land rezoned for industrial mining, a legal maneuver designed to force my hand. "This is their last shot, Maya," Arthur said. "They're trying to intimidate you with a big number and a big legal threat. The rezoning hearing is in 6 months. We can fight it, but it will be expensive. This is the moment of truth. You can walk away with $500,000, a life-changing amount of money, or we can dig in for a long, ugly fight." $500,000. I thought about what that could buy: a nice apartment in a city, a college education, a new car, a life of comfort and ease, a life as far away from Cold Creek in my past as I could get. I looked around the barn. I looked at the clean, orderly tools on the wall. I looked at the fire glowing in the wood stove. I looked at the blueprints for the house that was waiting to be built. I thought about my grandfather's calloused hands, about his quiet belief in me. I thought about the difference between a price and a value. "Mr. Gable," I said, my voice clear and calm, "tell them no, and tell them my counteroffer is that they can leave my town and never come back." There was a chuckle on the other end of the line. "I will enjoy making that phone call," he said. "Now, about our legal strategy." The fight was just beginning, but I wasn't scared anymore. I knew I wasn't just fighting for a piece of land. I was fighting for a legacy. I was fighting for my home. The months that followed were the hardest and best of my life. I turned 18. I was officially an adult. I spent my days working in the barn, learning. I read my grandfather's carpentry books. I watched videos online. I started with small projects, fixing a broken chair, building a simple bookshelf. My first attempts were clumsy, but I kept at it. Frank from the hardware store would come by sometimes and give me pointers. He never made me feel stupid. He'd just watch, then say something like, "Try holding the saw a little different. Let the tool do the work." The community of Cold Creek, slowly but surely, adopted me. When they heard about the fight with the developers, they rallied. Mrs. Gable started a petition. Frank put a sign in his window that said, "Cold Creek isn't for sale." People I'd never even spoken to would stop me on the street and tell me to keep fighting. They saw me not as an outsider, but as one of them, defending their way of life against a faceless corporation. We went to the zoning hearing in the spring. The town hall was packed. Westward Holdings sent a team of slick lawyers in expensive suits. They talked about jobs and progress and the economic benefits of a mine. Then Arthur Gable stood up. He spoke for 10 minutes. He talked about the history of the Anderson family in Cold Creek. He talked about a grandfather's legacy. Then he called me to the stand. I was terrified. I stood in front of the town council, my hands shaking, and I just told them the truth. I told them about my grandfather's letter. I told them about his dream to build a home, not a hole in the ground. I unrolled his blueprints and showed them his vision. "This land isn't valuable because of what's under it," I said, my voice getting stronger with every word. "It's valuable because of what you can build on top of it. A home, a future, a community. Westward Holdings sees a commodity. I see a legacy. Please, don't let them take that away." When I was done, the room was silent for a moment, and then someone started clapping, and then someone else. Soon, the whole room was applauding. The council voted unanimously to deny the rezoning request. We had won. That evening, I went back to the barn. The legal battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. I stood in the middle of the floor, the blueprints in my hand, and looked at the massive, empty space. It was daunting. It was terrifying. It was perfect. I didn't have a house yet. I didn't have a family, not in the traditional sense. But I had a home. I had a community. And I had a plan, drawn by the hand of the man who had saved my life without ever knowing it. He had given me more than a barn, more than money. He had given me a foundation, both literally and figuratively. He had taught me that the strongest structures aren't built with just wood and nails, but with love and foresight and an unshakable belief in the person you're building for. The story doesn't end there, of course. That was just the beginning of building a house, of building a life, of becoming the person my grandfather always knew I could be. It's a long road, and I'm still walking it, but I'm not walking it alone anymore. This whole experience taught me something powerful. Sometimes the things that look like endings, a door slamming shut, a family turning its back, are actually doorways. They are painful, necessary invitations to step into a different life, a life that is truly your own. Your inheritance might not be a barn full of secrets. It might be a talent you've ignored, a friendship you've neglected, or just the quiet, stubborn resilience that's been inside you all along. Don't be afraid to claim it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to find your own strength in the ruins of your past, please consider subscribing and joining our community. And I want you to tell me in the comments, what's the most important thing you've ever built? It doesn't have to be a house. It can be a friendship, a skill, a life. I read every single comment, and I can't wait to hear your story. You are not alone. Keep building.